Hey everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be going through all the books that I read in August. So if you watched my August TBR video, then you'll know that this month was actually the 1 year anniversary of when I started my BookTube channel. And so to celebrate, I asked some of my BookTube friends if they would pick my TBR for me this month. And I have to say that they did pretty well, because of the books that were on my TBR, I've given all of them between a 3.5 and a 5-star rating. There was one book I read this month actually that I gave 2.5 stars, but that wasn't a book on my TBR, it was a book that I read for a book club. And then I am halfway through one of the books that was on my TBR, over halfway actually. I think I'm about 60% of the way through, but I am enjoying it so far, and so I feel like I'm going to enjoy it overall. So yeah, August has been a pretty successful month. I was doing weekly reading vlogs throughout the month, so if you want any more detail on any of these books, then I will leave those reading vlogs linked in the description if you'd like to check them out if you haven't seen them already. As always, I will also have timestamps in the description, so if there are any particular books that you're interested in, then you can flick ahead if you would like to. But the first book that I finished this month was Survive the Night by Riley Sager, and this is the third book that I've read by Riley Sager, and I have to say it was probably my least favourite of the books that I've read so far. So this follows a college student called Charlie, whose best friend, you learn at the very start of the book, was murdered by a serial killer. And Charlie isn't doing so great because of it, and she's thinking about dropping out of college. So she decides to go home for a while, and she's at her college notice board when she starts chatting to this guy who happens to be driving in the same direction as her, and so they decide to do a rideshare. However, not long after they set off, Charlie begins to suspect that this guy is a little bit dodgy and that he might not be telling her the whole truth. What I did like about this book was the way that it built up tension, and I really liked the isolated setting and that forced proximity. It definitely had me gripped, and I really struggled to put it down, especially towards the end. However, one thing that I didn't like was so Charlie, the main character, is a very unreliable narrator, and the reason for that is that she sees these hallucinations that kind of play like movies in her mind, and I didn't like the way that that was included. And one criticism that I've seen actually of Riley Sager's previous books is the way that he writes these really frustrating main characters, and with his previous books it was something that I noticed but I was able to overlook it. However, in Survive the Night it really started to annoy me. There were certain situations that felt really unrealistic. However, one of the main themes in this book is the movies, and in particular 90s slasher movies, and this did feel like a movie to me. Like, as I was reading it, I could visualize exactly how it would play out on screen if it was a film. And so yeah, overall I gave it a 3.5 stars because I did enjoy it mostly overall, but there were just a few little things, well, not even little things, there were a few things that I just didn't really like. The second book I read this month was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona, and this is a literary mystery thriller. I would say that it's more of a mystery rather than a thriller, and it's told from a few different perspectives, but one of the main perspectives that you're following is a guy called Ted, who's described as a bit of a loner, and he lives in this house on Needless Street with his cat Olivia, and you do also get the perspective of his cat. You also follow a woman called Dee, who is trying to find out what happened to her sister, who went missing when they were kids, I think around 10 years ago. I gave this book 4 stars overall because I did really like the writing, and I thought that it was very cleverly written. It's not the kind of book or the type of thriller that has a lot of really sharp and shocking twists and turns. It's much more of a gradual build-up, and I really liked that. And I also really liked reading from Olivia's perspective, so Olivia the cat. I know that some people really wouldn't like that, but I like cats, and so I liked reading from the point of view of one. I will say that there was a little bit in the middle where I felt kind of bored because nothing was really happening, and I felt like there were a lot of questions that I had, but we weren't getting many answers. However, I did really like the ending, and especially the author's note. I really appreciated the way that she explained what she was trying to do with this book. The direction that the book goes in does get very dark, and so I would recommend checking the trigger warnings beforehand if you need to, because yeah, there are quite a few trigger warnings, especially with regards to abuse. The next two books I read were The Pale Dreamer and The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. So these are both part of the same series, where The Pale Dreamer is a prequel novella to The Bone Season. So The Bone Season is book one, and you can read the prequel novella at any point, sort of thing. However, I decided to read it first because I'd heard that it can help with the magic system and understanding how things work, and I have to say that it did help, even though I was still confused. So The Bone Season is a fantasy with a sci-fi twist, and it's set in this world where you have clairvoyance. However, clairvoyancy is illegal, and the main character that you're following is a girl called Paige Mahoney, who is part of this syndicate, this underground network of clairvoyance. And at the start of the book, she's captured and she is taken away somewhere where she learns what happens to clairvoyants when they are discovered. That's all I can really say, because I didn't know much more than that before I went into the book, and I think that part of my enjoyment of this book was learning about this world, and I don't know what else I can say without spoilers. I gave this book 4 stars overall because I did really like the characters and the writing and just the general atmosphere. However, the main criticism that I had was how much I struggled with the magic system in this book. There's a lot of different types of clairvoyance in this world, and even after finishing the book, I still feel like I didn't 100% understand everything, and so I'm hoping that it gets a little easier as the series goes on. It was also a lot darker than I was expecting, and that's not necessarily a bad thing or anything, but the main character, Paige, goes through quite a lot, and it is very brutal in places, and so that is just something that I wanted to mention in case you wanted to check the trigger warnings beforehand. Overall though, I did really like Paige as a main character, and I definitely want to continue the series. I'm pretty sure that this book came out in 2013, I want to say, and there were quite a few tropes within the book that meant that I found it just a little bit predictable. However, I'm hoping that that won't be an issue with the later books. I think that the most recent book actually came out this year. I'm pretty sure that it came out right at the start of the year, and so I'm hoping that it will have evolved and that it will feel less tropey as the series goes on. Okay, so the next book I read was The Man I Think I Know by Gayle, and this is a contemporary fiction book that follows 2 guys called Danny and James. Danny is the kind of guy that has always struggled to keep a job for longer than a few months, and right at the very start of the book he learns that his benefits are about to be cut off, and so he accepts the first job that comes along, which is working as a care assistant, and that's where he meets James. So something happened to James a few years ago. There was this incident, it's described as, which means that he is now disabled, and the story is basically about their friendship, and I really liked that actually about the book, because I was thinking about it, and I don't think I've read many books where the main focus of the book is around a friendship between 2 men. Another thing I did really like is how the book is set in Birmingham and around the local area, and that's where I'm from, and so I really liked that I recognised a lot of the places that were being mentioned. If you like emotional contemporaries, then I would really recommend this book, and I would also actually just in general recommend Gayle's books. I've read 3 of his books so far, and all of them have made me cry. The next book I read this month was Jade City by Fonda, and I would probably say actually that this was my favourite book that I read this month. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. This is an adult fantasy that is set in a world where you have this city called Janloon, and this city is most well known for mining jade. So there are some people in this world that are immune to jade, which means that they're able to touch it and it won't affect them. However, there are some people who, when they touch jade, they become addicted, and it's almost like a drug. There are also some people in this world who go through training, which means that they're able to harness the power of jade, and it gives them these superhuman abilities. Within the city of Janloon, there are 2 main clans, and they basically monopolise the jade industry, and they control the way that it's traded. The story follows a few main characters. I think there's 4 main perspectives that you're following, and these main characters are all part of one family who run one of these clans. This is one of those fantasies that does have a slower build-up. However, I was never bored because I really liked the characters and I really liked the atmosphere and I really liked all of the family politics that was going on. Also, the way that Jade is described in this book, I could really feel how powerful it is. In general, I do really love political fantasies, and I am really intrigued to see where the next book goes, because I have a few theories and I have a few predictions, but I have no idea if I'm actually going to be right. The next book I read was They Both Die at the End by Silvera. So this is a young adult contemporary that is set in our world, but there's this sci-fi twist. So basically there's this company called Deathcast, and they have worked out how to predict when people are going to die. So on the day that you're going to die, you get a phone call around midnight telling you that it's your last day. And it follows two teenagers called Matteo and Rufus, who have both received their phone calls. I listened to the audiobook for this because I thought it would work really well as an audiobook. It's told from both points of view, so Matthias and Rufus, and it's written in the first person POV, so I thought that it would work well as an audiobook. However, unfortunately, I didn't really like this one. I gave it 2.5 stars. It was one of those situations where I could see what the story was trying to say, but it just wasn't really working for me. I think in general, I was just expecting more from this book. So I was really interested, for example, to see the way that society has adapted to this discovery. And you do see a little bit of that, but I wanted it to delve a little bit deeper, and the same with the emotions that the characters go through. It all felt very surface level, and I found that there was a part in the middle actually where I was kind of bored and I could feel myself zoning out. Also, I really didn't like the ending. Obviously, I won't go into spoilers, but the ending to me felt very rushed and very sudden. I gave this 2.5 stars overall, but I don't want to put anyone else off from reading this because it's a young adult contemporary and I know that I'm not the main target audience. But yeah, I did read this for a book club, and so I am actually still interested to see what other people thought of it because I know that this is really popular. It just didn't have the emotional impact on me that I was expecting. You're going to sit nicely while Sammy talks, or are you going to be a pest? You're going to be a pest, okay. So the final book that I finished this month was Royal Assassin by Hobb, and I'm not going to talk about this book too much because it is the second book in a very long series, and I did speak about the first book in my July wrap up. This book took me over a month to finish. I actually started it at the end of July, and then I read part of the physical book. I should probably hold the book up actually. What am I doing? So I read half of the physical book, or about a third of the physical book, back in July, and then I decided to switch to the audiobook because I've actually found that I prefer the audiobook. It's told in the first person POV, and so I do think it works well as an audiobook because it's like listening to Fitz tell me his story, or the story of his life. I have really grown to like the characters in this series, and I really like the politics and the magic system. I really liked actually that in this book we learn a lot more about both of the magic systems, but I also found this book a lot slower than the first book, and so that's why I think switching to the audiobook really helped, because it meant I could listen while I was multitasking. I don't know whether I'm the only person that feels this way, but sometimes if I'm reading a very dense book or a book that's really slow paced, I find that I don't ever want to pick it up because I know that it's taken me so long to read. I have actually already started the third book in this series, which I am again listening to on audiobook, and I'm really hoping that we get some answers to certain questions that I had after this book, because yeah, there's this underlying mystery plot that runs through this series and I really want to know what's going on, and so I'm hoping that we do get a few answers. Also, another thing that I didn't really like about this book in particular was a certain relationship. I tried to get on board with it, but I didn't like it. Oh yeah, I did also quickly want to mention that I am currently about 60% of the way through Malice by John Gwynne. So this was the final book on my August TBR. It's an epic adult high fantasy fantasy that's set in this world where there are giants and there are things that are starting to happen in this world that imply that this ancient prophecy is about to come true, and there's going to be this battle between good versus evil. I did struggle with this book a little bit in the beginning because there are a lot of characters in this book, and so it took me a while to get my head around what was happening, and it took me just a little bit of time to separate out the characters that I actually needed to pay attention to. So the main perspective that you're following in this book is a boy called Corbin, but then there's also a few other perspectives. I think there's about 7 in total. I should probably count actually. Even though this is a slower paced fantasy, I do think that it's well paced. It's like steady paced, if that makes sense. And I do really like John Gwynne's writing just in general. I think he does a really good job actually of building out settings and building out atmospheres, and his books feel very epic to me. So this is the second book that I've read by John Gwynne. The other was The Shadow of the Gods, and I think I slightly preferred The Shadow of the Gods only because I found it a lot easier to get into that. However, I know that this is the first book in a longer series. I don't actually know how many books there are in this series, but it does feel like the first book in a series because there is a lot of setup and there's a lot of getting to know the characters. Yeah, I am hoping to finish this before the end of the week. I'm trying to take my time with it. I don't want to feel like I'm rushing it because I want to make sure that I'm processing everything and that I'm not missing anything, because I have a theory, but I don't know if it's too obvious that that's the direction that the book is gonna go in. I don't know if I'm being led down one path when actually there's something else that's going on, but I feel like we're building up to something and it's about to get really, really good. This is also one of those fantasy series that I think would work really well as a TV show because of how epic it feels. And I actually think that John Gwynne is really good at writing battle sequences and fight scenes. And so when I'm reading this book, I can almost picture those more than anything else. And so, yeah, I think that actually this would work really well as a TV adaptation. But yeah, I think that brings me to the end of the video. So thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And also don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and click subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you next time. Bye.